Alright, time to reveal why Street Fighter 6 is the yellow paint of fighting games. Wait, is that the phone? Grab it.
Out of nowhere calls during a video? Okay. Hello? Holy, it's the president.
The president? Really?
Teamcrossbody, it's me, the big guy, Donald Trump, big fan, tremendous videos, very detailed, very wordy, people love it. Listen, we need to talk about ClayFighter, incredible series, totally underrated.
Well, our docket is full, Mr. President. What, you want us to cover the first game?
All of them, ClayFighter, ClayFighter 2, even 63 and a third, very misunderstood. Drop whatever you're doing, next video, no excuses. People will be asking questions if you don't, believe me.
Whatever he's talking about, he seems very passionate about it. Quick call, what was he talking about?
We're covering ClayFighter.
ClayFighter or Drop Slop? Tough choice.
Okay, this is Teamcrossbody, and this is our look at the ClayFighter series now?
It's showtime!
Welcome TCB faithful to yet another episode of The Run Back, the presidentially mandated series that asks the question, was this fighting game any good? This time, we're making sure that pounding clay is all the rage.
Oh, I spot, oh, jeez.
Before we dive into the ClayFighter series itself, we should probably talk about its developer slash publisher, Interplay, and how this bizarre Clayfield brawler even came to be.
Interplay Productions was founded in 1983 by Brian Fargo. At first, they focused on developing and publishing computer games, quickly gaining a reputation for technically strong and story-driven titles.
Mostly serious RPGs, before anyone imagined Clay in a fighting game.
They've released hits like The Bard's Tale in 1985, which established them as a major player in the RPG scene. Later, Wasteland in 1988 helped define post-apocalyptic RPGs and influenced many games in the future. These successes gave Interplay credibility and financial stability. By the early 1990s, Interplay started exploring console publishing, especially for the Super Nintendo. Their established publishing experience gave them the freedom to experiment with different genres.
So they can try something unusual without risking the whole company.
And that's important because their next project would take them far from their RPG roots.
The early 90s were a golden era for fighting games. Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat dominated arcades and consoles. This created a huge opportunity and plenty of competition and controversy. Mortal Kombat in particular sparked debates over violence, eventually leading to the creation of the ESRB in 1994. We go over this in a fair amount of depth in our Mortal Kombat 4 video way back in the first season of the Run Back.
This created a niche for a fighting game that could be popular but non-violent. So Interplay greenlit what will become ClayFighter. They partnered with Visual Concepts for development and Danger Productions for animation.
Instead of sprites or digitized actors, the characters were made out of clay, giving the game an instantly recognizable look.
They used stop-motion claymation, sculpting characters, photographing them frame by frame, and digitizing the results. It was time-consuming, but it made the game stand out visually.
And it gave the game a playful tone, distinguishing it from the more serious or violent fighters. By 1993, ClayFighter launched on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. It wasn't competing directly with Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat. Instead, it offered a humorous, non-violent alternative.
And that approach worked. Its unique art style and comedic presentation helped it stand out in a crowded market. Interplay used its freedom as a publisher to explore something unusual while still aiming for commercial success. From RPG roots to something more experimental, Interplay's journey to ClayFighter shows how a company could take creative risk in a changing market.
And even though it seems unusual today, it did leave a memorable mark on fighting game history.
A small but distinct niche.
But being vaguely remembered doesn't exactly translate into being a good game.
Yeah, I bet. Tell that to some of the comments we got in our last retrospective.
Our Marvel ToeCon in about 5 years. Anywho, let's dive in and make sure not to leave any fingerprints with the first ClayFighter, Tournament Edition.
Yeah, party on!
Alright, I really want to know what the explanation for all this clay-based nonsense is, so let's go over the story. It all starts with a meteor crashing into a circus. Not near it, into it.
Noonday sun is nighttime.
This meteor is made of a mysterious substance that mutates everything it touches, turning the performers into, well, you guessed it, clay.
So instead of calling for help, they start a fighting tournament.
As you do in the 90s.
No questions asked, no follow-ups, just immediate violence to see who will emerge ruler of their newfound claymated hell.
Pretty much. Each character is basically a walking gimmick. Snowmen, blobs, Elvis impersonations, all competing to see who comes out on top.
Ignore the fact that we had several humans who were hit with this meteor. I'm glad they're fine after the impact and all, but wasn't this amusement park supposed to be abandoned?
Between that and the Noonday Sun botch, I'm starting to think this game wasn't completely made in America as it so proudly proclaims. But that aside, it's a solid setup.
Which is good because I don't think we're getting answers to anything else.
Probably not. Man, that was quick. Better retention is probably in the toilet now. Well, for those who remain and were paying attention to the intro, we did indeed say Tournament Edition. We're skipping right to the upgraded or enhanced or whatever you want to call it version of the first game.
Spoiler alert, it won't be the last. You think we have time to play 2 versions of the same game? We've got families to return to, I think.
But I suppose we should touch on the original game and explain what Tournament Edition glopped on. The earliest version of ClayFighter released on the Super Nintendo and is a tournament-style fighter in the same vein as Street Fighter 2. Does that cover it? Because it's exactly how it sounds for a game released in '93 from a dev team with no prior fighting game background.
Pushing the visuals aside, ClayFighter at its core was just a Street Fighter 2 clone, with nothing to really add to the genre except, well, clay. But we might be a little unfair here. It does bring something to call its own, and that's its strange KO system. You see, this was before super attacks were more commonly used. So what they had was this thing where if you hit your opponent enough times, an arrow-seeing KO will point at them. During this time, if you were to land a non-projectile special attack unblocked, it would basically smash them across the stage.
There are also 2 unique hit stun states characters can enter. Striking an opponent with a slicing attack will have them be cut in half. And during this condition, you're not able to move for a little bit. So I guess the game just stops.
Stopping in the middle of something? Sounds like one of our videos.
The second one is a little more useful. Feeling flat, obviously caused by crushing the opponent. With this one, it's possible to be hit with follow-up attacks or even thrown while flattened. So it's infinitely more useful. But outside of those 3 mechanics, you can argue most of the other things found in ClayFighter are just concepts adapted from Street Fighter 2. But Jinky.
Like the stun system, that's really random and inconsistent, or the smorgasbord of questionable things with throwing and our holds. Holds of which are really powerful, and able to set up some particularly nasty combos since it tosses the opponent in the air afterwards. Whether these are glitches or features, I suppose is up to the individual.
Calling the game jank might be more of a compliment because it's technically functionally broken in most areas. Some other problems include bad feeling controls, damage imbalances across the cast, that aforementioned slow and floaty gameplay, and inconsistent hitboxes. But I suppose it does have throw loops, so I guess that alone turns this piece of trash into a masterpiece full of depth.
So yeah, the first version of ClayFighter is pretty damn bad. Not even so bad as good type of bad, just aggressively bad. But that's okay. If Street Fighter 2 is any inspiration to go by, Interplay will just boop and bop a few numbers, add a few more things here and there, and release a new game next year.
And that brings us to Tournament Edition, which can be viewed as an update, but in this case, it's more like ClayFighter deciding it needed a second chance.
A slightly more competitive second chance.
The biggest change here is balance. The original game wasn't exactly known for fairness. Some characters were just better, full stop.
Pick this one or lose is not an ideal design.
Tournament Edition reworks damage, speed, and move effectiveness across the roster to make fights feel more even.
Or at least less obviously broken. They added new moves, tweaked existing ones, combos are a bit more reliable, and characters have a lot more options during fights.
Which gives the illusion of depth.
And sometimes actual depth.
Sometimes. But to Interplay's credit, Tournament Edition, through its faster, better balanced, and more consistent gameplay, makes it a significant step up from the original by not feeling like ass to play.
There's actual fun to be had here. That's not saying they fix every problem, it's not perfect by any means. Although the balance is night and day, some characters are still very much stronger than others, but that's less the game's fault and more just how balance works. Occasional glitches might pop up, but their overall experience is better.
Outside of additional content and gameplay improvements, Tournament Edition doesn't have anything new mechanically to introduce to the fighting system.
But we did forget one thing. ClayFighter has an adjustable game speed, much like Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting. You could crank up or slow down the action.
Changing the game speed to be faster lets you pull off combos that normally miss. Slower matches give you extra time to react, like when you're flattened. This seemingly only works for attacking animations. Other things like walking, jumping, and falling speeds remain the same, at least in Tournament Edition.
We have no idea if the game speed affects the original in the same way, but if I were a guessing man.
And that's ClayFighter Tournament Edition. It didn't leave the best first impression, but over time it grew on us.
Even with the improvements that TE brought, we probably still wouldn't call it a great game. But compared to its release date, being meh must feel like getting off death row.
Now with the course somewhat corrected, let's see if Interplay's follow-up can continue the momentum.
We're just warming up now.
ClayFighter 2 Judgment Clay, which is a really cool name by the way, released in 1995, and is Interplay's attempt at taking the proverbial worst side of mechanics that was ClayFighter and rejiggering it into something that resembles a more confident fighting game.
Rather it succeeds in that assignment? No, not really. ClayFighter 2 doesn't feel too substantially different from what was found in Tournament Edition, but we'll go into that in a bit. What's the plot this time?
Alright, so remember in the first game how it gave you the basic gist of the plot before the title screen?
Yeah?
Well, not for Judgment Clay. Everything you want to know about the setup is tucked away in the game's manual, which is especially nice this time because there's actually a bit more effort put into the story than before. It all starts in Mudville where the original Clay meteor hit. After hearing about what went down in Playland, a scientist named Dr. Klein rolls into town carrying the same residue from that meteor and starts spreading it around to create even more Clay fighters.
This is a terrible idea. We don't need more of these assholes running around.
After the fall of M-Boss from the first game, Klein declares himself as a new Grandmaster of Mudville, and then he sets up the C2 tournament to decide who's worthy of taking that title.
Why would he declare himself master of something no one wants, only to invite people to try to take that nothing title away? Feels more like a DSP birthday situation than some badass fighting tournament.
Because I'm happy. Everything before her was another life. Everything since I met her has been the best life. And I wish that for all of you.
Now here's the part where things get weird. Despite being set up as the main villain in the manual, Dr. Klein actually doesn't show up in the game.
What?
Yeah, he was supposed to, but for some unknown reason he got cut. Instead of fighting Dr. Klein in the end,
You just don't?
nope, each character's final match is against a corrupted version of themselves, acting as their rival. Considering the last game had a final boss to call its own, this comes across as more rushed and lazy.
Well, there's your answer. The game was rushed. Kind couldn't make it in because of that very reason. Judgment Clay has one of the shortest dev times in the series, with the original taking about a year give or take, and the next infamously being in development hell for quite some time. ClayFighter 2 had to be released with half the development time compared to the previous game, clocking in at about less than 6 months. And it shows.
You're telling me this game is just Tournament Edition again, but honestly, worse. Not original ClayFighter bad, but we're definitely knocking at the door here.
Much like Tournament Edition, Judgment Clay doesn't add any fresh hook or new mechanic, and you'd think that wasn't too much of a big deal. I mean, we enjoyed Tournament Edition for what it was, but nope, this game feels like a massive step backwards.
Hold on. I don't want to completely start crapping on the game. We should probably point out at least some good things. Well, the only good thing the sequel managed to do better than the original is the feel of combos. They feel a lot more reliable than the first game due to their better hitbox placements, improved input buffering, and frame data.
Well, reducing every character's moveset also helps with this by not having an assortment of just random combinations of motions and charge inputs. We didn't mention this in the first game, but move lists for some characters were massive and had absolutely no logic. Take returning fighter Bad Mr. Frosty for example. In the first game, he had pretty much every command found in any fighting game ever, just in his move list alone.
Quarter circles, half circles, forward and back, charge inputs both up and down, non-charge forward and back commands. Shockingly, the only thing he was missing was a 360 command grab input.
All in all though, this turned the simple act of picking up a character just to see what they can do and turned it into a straight up puzzle for most of the roster, and that part wasn't very fun. So ClayFighter 2 simplifying that process is greatly appreciated.
Well then, I hope you enjoyed the old monkey's paw because most of the cast of Judgment Clay feels like ass to play. Not too much for the returning fighters because their normals got slightly better, but for the new guys, I've never seen such a collection of terrible looking normals.
The roster here is completely made up of a bunch of MVC3 Henson Coles, 12 Shawns, and MK9 Noob Sabots. Most of the cast doesn't have any reach with their attacks, forcing you to get up awkwardly close in order to throw these stupid looking attacks out. That doesn't make for a game that feels good to play, as you're just tossing out random special moves all the time because there's no neutral play.
You think having to get so close to the opponent would mean the gameplay is heavy on strike throws. But what if I were to tell you that the absolute geniuses down at Interplay decided to remove throws and holds from the game, which enforces this spastic style of gameplay even more. There are situations you're just sitting there blocking whatever your opponent's spamming, just rolling your eyes because there's nothing else for them to do to open you up. It's not very engaging.
Two of the strongest characters in the game, Spike and Sarge, has the best normals and the most spammable move in the game respectively. And on that note, this brings us back to those evil clone characters we mentioned earlier. They're also unlockable. It makes up the other half of the roster.
We don't particularly mind that they're just recolors. Stop motion animation is a long process and the game was rushed, we get it. But most of these guys aren't even interestingly designed or anything. To be fair, in the case of Frosty, they just smashed the remainder of his bloated moveset to his counterpart Ice, and the others just have either bad or broken versions of what they have already. Complete filler characters, just to say the roster is bigger.
Let's take Jack, Octohead's counterpart, as an example. His overall moveset is largely whatever, but he does have one of those highly spammable special moves that's extremely safe on block. Now this move is stupid, and any reasonably designed fighting game that has a move like this would have easily propelled a character like this to the top of the tier list. But since this game doesn't have any throws, he just makes you block all day with not much else to do, making him the worst character in the game.
Why are there no throws? What made them think this was okay without substituting it with something else?
I get that throws or holds more appropriately were broken in ClayFighter, and it led to a bunch of free damage and setups, but removing them haphazardly just made a bad fighting game worse.
And sadly, that's all there is to ClayFighter 2 Judgment Clay. In every sense of the word, this is a downgrade. It's slower, it's uglier, and it's way worse design compared to Tournament Edition. And remember, that game isn't good either, but it did try to fix a lot of the problems with their original, so it ultimately pointed the series in a way more hopeful direction than what this game does.
I'm really disappointed with this one. Thought it was going to be a lot better, but that means we're currently 1 for 1 when it comes to this series right now. If things are this bad, I'm horrified thinking about what new lows the final game in this retrospective will reach.
Bro, they got rid of throws so they won't have to deal with them. I wonder if they'll just X blocking altogether now. I guess we won't find out till we take a look at Sculptor's cut.
Hey, hold on to your seats.
The last ClayFighter title to be released is Sculptor's Cut, but much like the first game in this series, it didn't come out as just that. ClayFighter 3 started as 63 and a third,
which is either a joke about how the Nintendo 64 has a habit of slapping the number 64 in its titles, or it's a naked gun joke. I'm not even sure Interplay knows.
Now, 63 and a third was a broken mess. Controls were janky, animations were clearly missing frames, and some characters were basically unplayable. Hitboxes were weird, and let's not even talk about certain supers. Sculptor's Cut tries to fix that brokenness. Keyword, tries.
It was also a Blockbuster rental exclusive, just like Tournament Edition back on the Super Nintendo, because who's gonna buy this thing twice? Come on.
The story, well, it's basically the first and second game mashed together, but now it's on a random island for no apparent reason. The meteor hits, citizens turn into clay, tournament happens. You know the drill.
It gives the series some continuity if you ignore the fact that the island has no connection to Mudville or Playland. And again, nobody questions why a falling meteor hitting a small town leads directly to an organized fighting tournament. But that's ClayFighter. Don't be shocked to restart the end sentences with, because ClayFighter.
But hey, you gotta give it to that intro.
A meteor crash one fateful day turned Mudville creatures into clay, with heroes bent on doing right and twisted foes up for the fight. ClayFighter!
1-to-1 they set the stage.
ClayFighter!
Pounding clay is all the rage.
Ew. Mechanically, Sculptor's Cut is the first ClayFighter to start feeling like an actual fighting game since the original Tournament Edition. It's not perfect, but combos feel good, specials are more consistent, you can actually see some depth if you ignore the jank.
It's still fairly sluggish and the animations are jerky and rough looking, but it is a step forward. It's also the first game in the series with stage transitions. Knocking someone through a door will have the fight spill over into the next map, only to get knocked right back into the previous map because the fighter who was the victim of the transition will appear right beside the door they went through instead of away from it, because ClayFighter.
It's broken, but be nice, at least you're trying something new.
63 1/3 had a combo system that was heavily inspired from Killer Instinct. I assume this was done to make getting into things way easier than it was in earlier titles. And for what it was worth, it is satisfying to pull off longer combos, but that was about it. There isn't much in the way of depth when it came to it. Now, these style of combos were taken out in Sculptor's Cut and replaced with a traditional system more in line with what you will find in the previous games. This is a bit of a head scratcher though, because for all intents and purposes, the Killer Instinct way of doing things was largely fine. Combos were easy to pull off and it had a skill-based combo breaker system. Removing all that just made a bunch of problems spring up.
And those problems came in the form of infinite combos. Not like they didn't exist before Sculptor's Cut, but they have to be way more simpler to pull off now. So yes, that same meteor that hit the island apparently gave everyone an infinite combo in the corner. No combo breakers, no head stun decay, just sit there and get pummeled until someone dies. Some characters do have access to launchers, but once again, the easiest way to get someone into the air is with a hold. Luckily, you could turn off throws and holds into options if you really want to recreate that aesthetically terrible ClayFighter 2 experience.
There's also a parry system presumably inspired by Street Fighter 3. It's neat in theory, letting you punish opponents after a parry which freezes them in their current animation for a while, at least long enough for you to throw out a super. But the game's jankiness makes it hard to use consistently. That, and there's still no training mode for the third time in a row. That aside though, it's a cool addition and it shows Interplay was at least paying attention to contemporary fighting game mechanics.
It's a shame the same can't be said about the visuals. Graphically, well, it's a mess. The sprites here are very low resolution and are filled with chopped up animations and clipping issues that make attacks feel weird. Then they just threw in rough looking 3D backgrounds that clash with the clay characters. It looks really bad. It looked like they're fighting in front of polygons that were made for a completely different game.
And that different game was still in the development stage. But hey, at least the music is surprisingly solid. It's goofy, playful, and matches the absurdity of ClayFighter's world perfectly. Easily the strongest audio in the series.
And then we get to the ultra combos and fatalities. Yeah, they're here.
Interplay looked around and asked what other popular fighting games can we parody, and landed on pretty much the only other popular fighters on the console outside of Smash Bros. Mortal Kombat Trilogy and Killer Instinct Gold.
I don't know the stupid name they gave them, but ultra combos allow you to perform big, flashy, multi-hitting finishers, and fatalities, well, they exist.
But they look terrible. Most of the fatalities boil down to two options. Either the fighter gets launched off the island, or they lamely get chopped in half using a paint tool. Sure, it technically fits the bloody but clay joke, but only having two options comes off as lazy. They couldn't even commit to the bit fully.
By the time you trigger one, you're just squinting that frosty, awkwardly spinning, the KO pops up, and you're just left thinking, well, that happened. So yeah, ultra combos, fun. Fatalities, visually awful, repetitive, and underwhelming, but they're here, and that's something, I guess.
Negativity aside, Sculptor's Cut is the first game to combine most of the things Interplay has learned up to this point. They're smashed together and held there by Elmer's, but once again, there is improvement, even if it's a little hard to see.
It's messy, visually rough, sometimes broken and unbalanced, but it's the closest ClayFighter has ever come to feeling like a real fighting game. And that's Sculptor's Cut. It's ClayFighter trying to be a fighting game, but it's still just pure ass caked in clay.
I don't know what I was expecting. I really thought the ClayFighter series was a lot better than what we played here.
Yeah, same. Going through these, it just felt like it's serious, constantly chasing trends, instead of figuring out what it actually wants to be.
This might sound weird, but I couldn't get Bubsy the Bobcat out of my head while we played.
Bubsy, seriously.
Hear me out. Bubsy was infamous for copying whatever was popular. Early games were basically riffs on Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario Bros. And then you get Bubsy 3D trying to jump into 3D with the same "it's a parody" excuse.
Yeah, okay, I see it. ClayFighters is the same thing. Outside of the clay aesthetic and the whole "it's a parody" angle, it doesn't really do anything with the genre. It just copies whatever fighters were popular at the time.
First Street Fighter 2, then is later pulling from stuff like Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct.
Yeah, and it never adds anything to those formulas, it just imitates them, usually badly.
And after Sculptor's Cut, the series just disappears. Not for a lack of trying though, there were multiple attempts to bring it back.
Like ClayFighter Extreme, which was supposed to be a full reboot on the PlayStation. For what we know, that one got canned pretty early. Interplay was already starting to struggle financially by the late 90s, and ClayFighter wasn't exactly a hot property anymore.
Then you got ClayFighter Call of Putty. That one actually got announced and shown off. Wii era revival, smaller scope, downloadable title, makes sense on paper, but it just quietly disappeared. No release date, no follow-up, nothing. Which probably says everything. Even as a smaller project, there just wasn't enough confidence or demand to push it out the door.
And then there's the weirdest one, ClayFighter 2016, that was supposed to be a modern reboot but got stuck in development hell. Rights issues, lack of funding, shift in direction, it just never came together.
So every time ClayFighter tried to come back, it just didn't.
Which honestly fits the series perfectly.
A franchise built on copying trends that never figured out how to survive without them. That's not saying I wouldn't welcome a comeback though. We may not be in a golden age for fighting games when it comes to gameplay depth, but we're definitely seeing more of them now than we have seen since the 90s. So what's one more? With the technology available today, ClayFighter's visuals could actually help it stand out, if it's done correctly.
But it needs a reason to exist beyond just parody. Not saying it has to reinvent the wheel or anything, but we had tons of fighters since 1998. If the devs can't come up with something new, fine, then just start with a template. Actually think about what ClayFighters can add instead of just copying it straight. With all that being said, let's see where these games land on the tier list.
Making our first F-tier game is Judgment Clay. We actually had high hopes for this one, and while it does improve a few things like combos and more focused movesets, it's just straight up bad everywhere else. Characters feel worse to play because of terrible normals. Most of the roster is unremarkable outside of a few returning fighters and Hoppy, and worst of all, the game has no throws. There's nothing here that isn't done the same or just flat out better in Tournament Edition.
Sculptor's Cut is the second best game in the series, landing in D tier. It's the closest the series actually gets to feeling like a fighting game. Not by much, but it does feel better to play overall and bring some interesting mechanics like the parry. But the janky animations and overall lack of polish hold it back from going up any higher.
Which means we feel that ClayFighter Tournament Edition is the best this franchise has to offer, which is a little sad since they really only got it right once. It's about as unpolished as Sculptor's Cut, but it benefits from being a much simpler fighting game mechanically, so there's just less to mess up. And unlike the others, Tournament Edition actually fixes, or at least hides, most of the original game's problems well enough that it doesn't consistently get in the way. It's not perfect by any means, and I hesitate to even call it good, but we did enjoy our time with it. And for that, it lands in C tier, but barely.
That wraps up this carefully sculpted edition of the Runback. How do you feel about the ClayFighter series? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and while you're down there, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hype if you want, I still don't know if that helps or not, but doing the other 3 things definitely does.
If you want more TCB, I don't know, action, come over to our sister channel, The Nostalgia Charts, where we talk about other non-fighting game related things. It's a bit of a slow burn when it comes to uploads, but our next video over there is going to be about the original Tomb Raider, and it's coming out eventually. Join the Discord, we talk about lots of stuff over there too. With all that out the way, thank you, and we'll see you next time on The Runback.
Teamcrossbody.